Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. This is Jessica Correjo with the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. It's a Tuesday, as you can see. And I'm also with the Iowa's Employment First leadership team. Thanks for joining us today. I actually don't have our presenter on yet today, but I wanted to get started and make sure I didn't leave you hanging on the line as we wait to see if Reyma shows up. I know she's very busy, so I'm hoping she'll just hop on here in a minute. A couple of things, hopefully before we get started. We will record today's session if we have it, and I will send the presentation along. If for some reason we aren't able to conduct today's presentation on intersectionality, we'll try to figure out another time in the schedule to get it fit in for everybody. It's a really important topic. Intersectionality matters, particularly in supported employment, as well as all aspects of our day-to-day life. So hopefully, if we don't get it today, we will get it in before August. Continuing education. For those of you who attend the webinars live, I can provide you a certificate of attendance for your ongoing education requirements. If you happen to watch an archived webinar or something after the fact, I've been encouraging agencies to track that on their own internally, but I'm happy to help you do that by providing a certificate that I've been using that you can then use within your HR department or your tracking department that tracks your training, or even have like a manager or supervisor sign off on that. That would be fine. A survey will launch after the webinar. And they always do. I ask that you please just take one quick minute to answer those questions. I try to keep them short and sweet. I appreciate your time and feedback. And just a second here, I might have what we need. Okay, good news. If you can give me just a couple of minutes, we do have Reyma, and it's an issue on our end. So give me just a second. I appreciate your patience, everybody. We'll get started here. Still working on it. Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Reyma.
Hi, here I am.
Hey, sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
That's my fault. Okay, well, so glad you can join and everybody's on and can hear us. So before I introduce you, let's get your presentation up for everybody. I'm going to give you that right now, Reyma.
Okay,
and
great.
You're going to get a prompt asking you if you're sure or if you will accept being a panelist.
Okay.
Hopefully you'll see that on your screen here.
Okay, I have been made the presenter.
Wonderful. So if you will, let's see here.
Do I need to press anything on this particular prompt?
Yeah, I think, sorry, just
there's a
second here. I think,
okay.
Yes, go ahead. Yep, hit that.
Okay, show my screen.
Perfect. There you go. And if you minimize that GoToWebinar screen, and then you can just pull up your PowerPoint, like in a slideshow. You probably already have it, but.
Sorry, I'm
right.
Slowly joining the 21st century, it seems. Okay.
Here we go. Perfect. So as you get that started, Reyma, I'll do a brief but not too embarrassing introduction here for you.
Okay.
So thanks again, everybody, for your patience. Without further ado, we're going to be talking today about intersectionality and engaging job seekers and families of diverse backgrounds. As I said earlier, intersectionality matters, and not just in supported employment, but in all aspects of our daily life. So we're really excited and lucky to have Reyma McCoy here with us today. She is the Executive Director of CICIL, or their Central Iowa Center for Independent Living, and she speaks all across the country on intersectionality. And as you know, CICIL is a nonprofit that's staffed by persons with disabilities who advocate and provide direct service to people with disabilities. Reyma is also a disability rights advocate, really just a great advocate in general for Iowans and people all across the country. She mobilizes Iowa voters with disabilities, and a little plug, she's running for the State House seat in District 38. If you want more information on that, check out her website. But without further ado, Reyma McCoy. Thanks, Reyma.
Thanks, Jess. And I'm really honored to be able to spend this next hour with everyone that has had the opportunity to join in on this webinar. I think that this is a conversation that is long overdue, especially as we talk more and more about customizing the supported employment experience to the individual job seekers that we're working with. I think that until recently, we've been missing some big pieces as far as that is concerned when we overlook a person's other forms of diversity in addition to their disability. And so I hope that this next hour is an informative opportunity for us all to examine the work that we do from kind of a different vantage point. So, as far as the goals for this session are concerned, obviously I want to make sure that everybody comes away from this webinar knowing that this is not the be-all and end-all as far as this conversation is concerned. This is an icebreaker as far as intersectionality, cultural competence, and the work that we all do around supported employment, customized, and all of that good stuff. And so we're going to talk a little bit about assumptions and stereotypes and generalizations, and how those can be a barrier to us providing individual supports to our diverse job seekers. And then we'll also talk about what intersectionality and cultural competency actually are, because those might be new terminologies for some of us that are participating in this webinar this afternoon. And we'll talk about their integral role in supporting our job seekers, not only to attain employment, but obviously maintain it as well. And then we will end this session with plenty of time for folks to ask any questions that you might have around what we talk about, or if you have specific job seekers that you're working with that present diversity that is that leaves you with questions. This is a safe space to ask those questions. Please keep in mind, safe space and comfortable space are not necessarily the same thing. And so a very important point of consideration. And so before we even begin, I want to apologize to everyone, because this isn't a how to be a job developer presentation. This PowerPoint was put together with the understanding that its target audience is people who already have experience in the world of supported employment. And so we're not going to talk about how to do job development. We're going to talk about diverse job seekers and how we can further tailor the supports that we provide to them to their unique experiences and vantage points. And again, safe space, not necessarily a comfortable space. So let's begin with talking about several different definitions. And some of these will be familiar to you and some of them won't be. Some of them are so familiar that they're words that we use with a degree of regularity, and we don't stop and think about what does this word actually mean. So I want to make sure that we're using these words with a consistent and uniform level of understanding of what they are. So generalizations are statements or beliefs about a cultural group that can be based on factual evidence. There are, for instance, there are folks who identify as Latino who also identify as Catholic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all Latino people are Catholic. Now, stereotypes are oversimplifications that have implications to an entire population of people. And so saying that all African Americans play basketball and listen to rap music would be a stereotype. Certainly, there are African Americans that enjoy playing basketball and enjoy listening to rap music, but that doesn't mean that all African Americans do. And obviously, when you meet someone who presents a certain or experiences a certain type of diversity, racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity. When you meet one person who is a member of the LGBT community, for instance, you have met one person who is a member of the LGBT community. They are not a spokesperson for the community, and no group of people are a monolith. So for the purposes of this session, consider this. The default setting, by and large, for a person with a disability is white, heterosexual, Christian, and oops, that without a disability should not be there. I apologize. And this is also the default setting for Iowan. And so I have worked in the realm of supported employment for about 15 years now. I got my start in St. Louis. And my caseload in St. Louis was much more diverse than my caseloads have been in Iowa. Obviously, St. Louis presents a level of diversity that is different from Iowa, and so that would certainly be the case. But when I came to Iowa and engaged in supported employment, I was struck by how my colleagues, when a diverse person was added to their caseload, whether or not they were comfortable articulating it, sometimes struggled to provide support to that individual because that person was a member of a group that job developer, job coach had not had any prior personal experience with. And so obviously, people with disabilities come from all walks of life. As we can see here, every person here has a disability, and it also presents racial, ethnic, or sexual orientation diversity as well. These folks are intersectionality incarnate, and we'll talk about what that word actually means here in a few moments. So what is intersectionality? Intersectionality, the gist of it is, it's all about breaking down the silos that we all live in. And it's about acknowledging that many people present different layers of diversity, so to speak, within themselves. There are people of color who have a disability. There are people with disabilities who are members of the LGBT community. There are people with disabilities who are religious minorities. And so there's an interconnectedness that our diverse job seekers come to us with. And so it behooves us to be able to navigate that with a degree of deftness so that we can support them in a way that is meaningful to them to attain and maintain employment. And so through an awareness of intersectionality, we can better acknowledge and ground the differences amongst us and amongst the job seekers that we're working with. And so culture is a word that I think many people use, and we don't stop and think, okay, what is the actual definition of this word? So what is culture? It's an integrated pattern of human behavior, and it includes, but is not limited to, thought, communication, languages, beliefs, values, practices, manners of interacting. We'll talk a lot about that towards the end, roles, relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then cultural competency. That can sound like a bit of a mouthful to many people. What is that? And so cultural competency is a set of cultural behaviors and attitudes that are integrated into the practice methods of a system, agency, or its professionals that enables them to work effectively in cross-cultural situations. And Iowa is a state that is rapidly becoming more diverse. I've been here for the past 20 years, and the level of diversity that Iowa experiences currently is a lot different from what it was 20 years ago, certainly. And if you haven't worked with an individual who presents a different race or sexual orientation or religion from you, give it time, it will happen. And so being culturally competent is increasingly a tool in the toolbox that you definitely want to have if you want to do the work that we do in a way that is meaningful and of genuine assistance to our job seekers. And so how do we achieve cultural competency? So we achieve it by translating and integrating knowledge about the folks that we work with into specific practices and policies applied in cultural settings, like workplaces, obviously. So what is ethnocentrism? Ethnocentrism is treating people that we encounter or work with as if they're mirrors and looking at them from our vantage point. And so if I am a Caucasian, which I'm not, but if I were a Caucasian and I was working with a job seeker that was African American and wanting to understand their experience, to do that in an ethnocentric way, I would look at them and try to see how they present in a way that mirrors the way that I present as a white woman. Now, that can obviously be problematic because we're not looking at that individual, at that job seeker as they are. We're looking at them as we are struggling to understand how they mirror our own experience. And they don't, obviously, because they are an African American, not a white person. And so how do we work with diverse folks in a way that's not ethnocentric or problematic? We do that in a culturally sensitive way. And we're aware of cultural differences without necessarily assigning value. We don't say things like, I don't see color, or I don't see disability, or that kind of thing, because we understand that when we say things like that, certainly our intention is good, but we're kind of erasing that individual's personal experience. And so we don't want to do that. And how are we a safe person for our diverse job seekers? Well, obviously, we operate in compliance with rules, regulations, policies, and laws. We don't engage in discriminatory practices, that kind of thing. We respect all of the protected classes for our respective state. And so here in Iowa, that includes race, national origin, religion, disability, sex or gender, including pregnancy, color, veteran status, age, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, or genetic information. And so there's a spectrum to becoming culturally competent. And at one end of the spectrum is denial. a person that refuses. It's not that a person doesn't recognize cultural differences, it's that they refuse to see those cultural differences. And then the next step is defensiveness, recognizing some differences but seeing them as negative. I can come up with a variety of examples of this, particularly with regard to something that's kind of a hot topic in Iowa right now. Folks who come to this state from different countries, who are immigrants, can be seen in a variety of different ways, and many of those ways can be seen as negative. Especially if we're working with a job seeker who is a refugee or an immigrant from another country, we want to make sure that that kind of implicit bias is not something that is coloring our perception of that individual. And then the next step is minimization. Being unaware of our projecting our own cultural values onto other people who are different from us, and perhaps consciously or unconsciously seeing our values as similar. To step away from diversity that involves race or religious proclivity or that kind of thing, and speak about disability specifically, we can, when we're thinking about things in a way that minimizes a person's experience as having a disability, we can ask questions in our mind as far as, what can I do to make this person appear as least disabled as possible? That's minimizing that individual's experience as having a disability. And then the next step is acceptance, shifting our perspective to understand, from judging to understanding, that the same behavior can have different meanings in different cultures. And then finally, adaptation, evaluating the people that we're working with behavior from their frame of reference, not ours, and adapting our behavior to fit the norms of a different culture when called to do so in supporting an individual. And then communication, another one of those words that we use so often, we might actually forget what it actually means. And so communication provides an opportunity for folks of different cultures to learn from each other. And when we're working with people, we're learning from them just as much as they're learning from us, especially if it's a person that is diverse in a way that is unfamiliar to us. And we need to keep that in consideration. And sometimes that effective communication with that person who presents in a manner that's different from us even involves asking them questions, pulling from their expertise as being a member of whatever underrepresented group they are a member of. And so this also means not only using the language and the dialect of the folks that you're serving, or utilizing an interpreter that is able to facilitate clear communication between ourselves and the person that we're supporting. It also means using communication vehicles that are proven to have significant value and use by the folks that we're working with. In case you don't know, folks with disabilities are actually the largest and most diverse group in the US. 1 in 5 of us experiences a disability. And it's a group that's so large that obviously there's a wide range of folks who present different ages, genders, religions, ethnicities, socioeconomic levels, sexual orientations, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also the only group that any person can join at any time. Disability is a natural part of the human experience. Obviously, with age come experiences that are recognized as disabilities. And so many of us, if we live long enough, will experience disability in our lifetime. And obviously, people with disabilities have the right to live independently, control their lives, and fully participate in their community. And I think we all know that disabilities often a result of social, architectural, and environmental barriers, much more so than the actual experience of disability within an individual. And children and adults with disabilities are unique individuals with unlimited potential, just like everybody else. And so we've talked about a lot of different terminology and covered a lot of ground as far as what intersectionality is. And so let's spend this next several moments talking about actual real world experiences, providing supported employment services to individuals who are diverse. And so we're going to run through several different scenarios, and some of these scenarios might bring up some questions in folks, and so please feel free to save those questions and we can talk through them after I wrap up during our question and answer period. So obviously, please keep in mind that each individual is unique. Just because we're going to be talking about experiences with several different diverse people doesn't mean that these scenarios are relevant or pertinent to the populations that the folks that we're going to discuss represent. And so, Miwa, you have recently been assigned a new customized client. Her name is Miwa, and you have an intake appointment with her in her home. You arrive and you wonder why there are a lot of shoes outside of Miwa's door. You open, or the door opens and an Asian American individual answers. You hold out your hand to shake theirs as you walk into their home with your shoes on. Lots going on here. And if a person has not worked directly with a person who is of Asian American descent, there might not be anything here that raises any red flags for you. But many folks who have worked with folks who are Asian American know that there can be opportunities if you are going to the home of an Asian American where it might be appropriate to take off your shoes before you enter the home. And being on the lookout for clues can be very helpful as far as that's concerned. And so if you approach a door and there are a lot of shoes outside of it, that's a pretty clear signal that it might be prudent to at least ask if you need to take your shoes off. And then also, you may or may not know that shaking hands in certain cultures is not something that's done, and that includes Japanese culture. And so whether or not you hold your hand out to shake the person's hand who answers the door is appropriate, this person is probably going to find out. Either the person that answers the door is going to shake the hand without any problem or pause. And you might, if you're not aware that it's not customary to shake hands in a particular culture, that might leave you with some questions. And so, moving on to Tariq. Tariq is a new job coaching client. He wears a kufi, or a head covering that many Muslim men wear. And so you're supporting him at his orientation, and his trainer is walking him through the employee handbook. And conversation turns to the dress code, and it's brought up that head coverings are actually not allowed at this particular workplace. And so we're supporting Tariq, and this is something that he's going to be needing support through. It would behoove us to know that by and large, a person's religious expression is protected at work. And so if an individual is wearing a head covering, and that can be a kufi, that can be a hijab, or the scarf that many Muslim women choose to wear, or any other type of garment that a person wears as an expression of their religion, that is actually a protected activity for them. And so this type of situation might present us with an opportunity to have a clarifying conversation with an employer that's not aware that that is something that Tariq is able to do. And that is a protection that is afforded to Tariq, both at the state and federal level. And so with diverse job seekers or clients, in addition to supporting them at the workplace to ensure that the work that they're doing affords them reasonable accommodations as far as any disability that they choose to disclose, we often find ourselves providing supports to diverse job seekers or clients in other ways as well. And so being well versed in how to support a person who is a religious minority can be very important. And then Shamika. So you've been informed that you will begin working with a labor market job seeker, and her name is Shamika, and she's an African-American woman with a mild intellectual disability. And you are, and she are based in Decorah, but she's actually originally from Mississippi. And so you meet with Shamika and you personally find her to be angry and combative. And you look at her work history and you find that she's worked in a number of places, but has been terminated from all of them after a short period of time. And when you ask her why her time at all of her jobs has been so short, she exclaims, "None of those people like me. I don't have time for that mess." And so your first glance at Shamika, you might find her to be someone that has anger issues. But what if it's something deeper than that? You know, what if there are some cultural considerations to be taken with regards to Shamika? She's from Mississippi. That's a completely different cultural experience from Decorah, Iowa, certainly. There are different means of communicating, different ways of being. There's no Iowa nice in Mississippi. And so that's important to keep in mind. Additionally, Shamika has a mild intellectual disability. And we find with folks, and this includes everybody, when we're not being heard, when we're not being understood, that can be very frustrating for every single one of us on the planet. And that manifests in all of us in different ways. And so if a person has a mild intellectual disability, that might impact their ability to articulate their experience. And so they might compensate for that with anger. And if that anger is coming from someone who is an African American and you have a limited experience with African Americans, that might compound your feeling that this is an angry woman, when in fact, this is a woman that's not being understood, who's not feeling heard. Okay, so on to Mary. So your supervisor informs you that you will be assisting and orienting a new team member, and her name is Mary. And you're excited that the department is gaining a new job coach because you've been working a lot of overtime, and it's great to have someone else to join the team and take on some of that extra work that you've been doing. Now, Mary arrives to the work site, and you are supporting a client, and Mary's going to be shadowing. Mary happens to be in a wheelchair. Both the client and the client supervisor seem very surprised by this, and secretly, whether or not you want to admit it, you are surprised as well. So there's a lot going on here in this kind of brief scenario. And I throw this in as a gentle reminder to all of us that in addition to supporting people with disabilities, we should fully expect to be colleagues with people with disabilities, and at times even have supervisors who are people with disabilities. And we need to be prepared for that if we truly want to be culturally competent in the work that we do around supported employment. And so this will present an opportunity to you to perhaps kind of navigate this experience for Mary. and especially with regards to the supervisor and the client. You might need to at least remind the supervisor that you know, Mary's being in a wheelchair should not be an impediment to Mary being able to be in the workplace. And you might also have the opportunity to remind the client that employees and workers that work with clients can sometimes experience disability as well. So the $1 million secret to cultural competency is asking for help, asking for clarification, and asking for guidance. And I see it happen all the time in the kind of rush to appear like we've got everything under control, even if we are feeling unsure about something with regards to providing supports to someone who's unfamiliar to us for whatever reason. We either forget to ask, or we feel like it's not appropriate to ask because we're supposed to be the expert. We're supposed to be the job developer or the job coach or the coordinator. And if we ask questions, it's going to make us look like we're not the expert that our job seeker or client needs us to be. But it's absolutely essential in order to gaining cultural competency and also in order to gaining a meaningful understanding of the person or persons that we're working with. And so the $1 million secret to cultural competency is asking questions. The pocket change secret to cultural incompetency is saying things like, I don't see color, I see the client. That can feel like a way of kind of bypassing a potentially uncomfortable situation. But ultimately, if we do this, we're not serving the whole client. We need to see the client. We need to acknowledge the client as they are in order to serve them in a way that is meaningful to them. I don't see my coworker's disability, race, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I see the coworker. Well, it's the same thing. We're erasing our coworker's experience so that they can make sense to us. But the far more meaningful way of deriving an understanding of somebody else is not to erase their experiences, is to, again, ask questions. I need to help them to be normal. That obviously is not our job with regards to our job seekers' disabilities, but also with regards to any other layers of diversity that they present. Who are we to say what is normal? That's actually not a part of any job description I've ever seen written down. And so let's release that burden from our minds. It is not our job to help anybody to be normal. And you know, employers don't see color, they see employees. Well, they sure may try really hard to do that. And this is when it's important for us to step in and, if necessary, give our client's employer permission to see the whole client, to see the whole employee, and see that that's not necessarily a scary thing, and that actually by not seeing whatever diversity that employee presents, that could be an impediment to that employee being retained in that position. Very important. I have a master's degree or whatever certifications, CESP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't ask questions or else the client will think I'm stupid. No, not asking questions and making assumptions is what typically makes us experts look kind of stupid. It's the wise person that asks questions, asks for clarification. And it's the other person that doesn't do that. Rushing to kumbaya. We're feeling uncomfortable. We do what we can to kind of get to a place where we're talking about rainbows and unicorns and fluffy kittens and that kind of thing. It's only a question of time before we're going to need to have the difficult conversation about diversity, intersectionality, cultural competency. And so let's have it now instead of when it's too late and the job has been lost, or the unintentionally inappropriate thing has been said to a coworker who is an African American or a Muslim at work. So let's not rush to kumbaya. As we all know, we all want to be understood, and common client reactions to cultural incompetence or to not being heard or to being misunderstood can look like anger, and that can look like anger directed at you. It can look like anger at work, and I think we've probably all seen a time when a client's anger has led to job loss. We don't want that to happen, obviously, especially not because of cultural incompetence. And so anger is, as far as I'm concerned, is always an expression of something else. And so, positive behavior supports 101 here. A person, a client, a job seeker presents anger to us, we're always asking, okay, well, what is this anger expressing? And anger, frustration, not being heard can look like aggression. Shame, fear, guilt, embarrassment, overstimulation, cultural taboos with regards to gaze can look like avoidance of eye contact. Sensory processing disorders, cultural taboos with regards to human contact, physical trauma can look like touch phobia. And so what I'm talking about here is, we see a behavior, quote unquote, but what's actually going on there? Is it an expression of a disability? Is it an expression of a person's cultural vantage point, et cetera? Fear, isolation, loneliness, that can actually be paranoia or aggression. And obviously, oftentimes, being misunderstood can be debilitating. And so I throw this in because all of us probably are very accustomed to using person-first language. And so I want to talk very briefly about cultural competence with specific regard to the community of folks who experience disability. And so person-first language, what that looks like, person with autism, so to speak, for instance, person with epilepsy, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a growing movement amongst people who identify as having a disability, and it's all wrapped around this concept of person-first language. And the gist is person-first language throws people off of looking at a person who has a disability. And to correlate, when we think about an African-American person, we don't typically think person with African-American. We think African-American person without giving it a second thought. So many folks who experience disability feel that the same semantic consideration should be given with regards to disability. And I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions, so I'm not going to play this YouTube clip. But if anybody wants this PowerPoint sent to them, we can get it to you one way or another, and you can watch this YouTube clip. It's really informative. But long story short, person with autism, many autistic people, including myself, prefer autistic person over person with autism. And so being culturally competent with regards to the disability community is something that we should also keep in mind when we're thinking about intersectionality. So again, not to beat the drum, but asking is super important. If you make a linguistic or behavioral mistake, simply apologize and maintain your willingness to communicate. Please don't get defensive. That is the key way of shutting down important conversations with our clients, with their support people, and with employers and with coworkers. And obviously, we don't want to talk down to people. We don't want to ask personal questions pertaining to a person's race, gender identity, religion, disability, etc. And so please understand when I say that asking questions is important, we need to be cognizant that the questions that we're asking are appropriate and not intrusive. And if you're unsure of how to act or what to say with a person, and you feel like it's appropriate to ask the person, please do so. If it's more appropriate to ask a support staff, that's also good. Reaching out to a person that identifies as being a subject matter expert around all of these things, also a very appropriate avenue as well. And so I'm going to skip this YouTube clip as well. You really want to watch this YouTube clip. It's about 5 minutes long, and so we don't have time for it, but it presents a scenario of intersectionality that I think is just spot on. So I highly urge you to watch that. And so you are the expert at disability. Probably everybody that can hear my voice right now has advanced education or certification around working with folks with disabilities, working in the realm of supported employment, customized employment. You have been selected to do the work that you do and be employed at the agency that you work at because you possess the skills and qualifications to do this very important work. You are also essential in supporting employers to enhance their cultural competency around disability and the other diversities that your caseload presents in places of employment. We have to keep in mind that job seekers are experts at their personal experiences, and that includes disability, race, religious affiliation, gender identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have to be comfortable with the opportunity that at times the tables get turned and the expert, us, becomes the student of the client that we're working with, especially with regards to their specific experience. And so we've got to get comfortable with asking the folks that we support questions around who they are so that we can have a greater understanding and be more specific in the supports that we provide them. And seeking their guidance as we support them. I can't emphasize that enough. They are the subject matter experts of their own lives. And obviously, understanding saves jobs. Understanding the whole person can be helpful in successfully working with that person and responding appropriately. And cultural competence is an essential tool in supporting our job seekers to attain and maintain, super important, employment in the 21st century, especially as our state becomes more and more diverse. And so if you haven't heard me say it yet, in closing, please ask. Preferably a person with a disability who's also a member of a racial, religious, or other diverse group that you have questions about. Please do not let your questions go unanswered, because it will impact the degree of supports that we're able to provide to our diverse job seekers. And so this is me. I'm Reyma, and I think we've got like about 10 minutes for questions if anyone has any.
We do. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
As those questions come in, give folks a chance to type that there in the question pod or the control panel there on the right-hand side. I think as we give people time to do that, Reyma, I was excited to hear you mention positive behavior supports.
Yes.
That really seemed to hit me hard, right? When you were talking about understanding people and whether it's, a quote unquote behavior we don't want or want to see, all behavior is a message, right? And,
yes.
and what is that tied to and what is that expressing? That was, I think we're all aware of positive behavior supports, and I think that's something we can apply to this topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And positive behavior supports is a key way of understanding the folks that we work with, obviously. And we've probably all encountered an individual who's receiving supports, who's been labeled as being a quote unquote problem individual. And when it gets right down to it, the problem is that they're not being heard, at least by somebody that speaks their language, whatever that language might be.
Mm-hmm. And I know you hit on this a lot, talking about effective communication and, being able to ask for help or clarification or guidance. But it also seems like sometimes there might be a fine line between,
yes.
Asking a relevant question, a thoughtful question to that person about whatever makes them diverse, but maybe kind of, like you said, maybe getting too personal. Can you give us any further guidance on that, or maybe what that might look like? Let's say if you were doing some discovery with somebody or getting to know somebody. Do you have an example?
Yes, I have a very recent example. And I was speaking with someone who is working with an African-American woman, and the woman wears her hair natural. And if you don't know what that means that the woman doesn't use any chemicals to straighten her hair. And so the woman has an afro. And the job developer asked the woman, excuse me for laughing, how she gets her hair that way. That's not an okay question. One, how the woman gets her hair that way is not integral to her employment supports. Also, it's objectifies a person. Think about it, if you were just at the grocery store and someone came up to you and asked you, how do you get your hair like that? It really throws you off. And so if we are supporting a job seeker, we don't want to throw them off with that kind of question. And so that's not really a question that we need to ask, especially in the day and age of Google. If we have questions about how certain folks why their hair looks the way that it does, we can go to Google with that kind of question. And Google can really save us from asking a lot of stupid questions. And I'm not one of those people that says there's no such thing as stupid questions. There absolutely is such a thing as stupid questions. And so, get on the Google and ask the question, and no one will ever know.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any questions coming in.
Okay.
You did such a great job. But it can be a difficult topic, or sometimes I think if there, possibly not a scenario in front of you,
right.
Ask questions, right, that get you thinking and kind of, but I think you gave folks a lot of great things to think about and to talk about, to Google, and some great YouTube videos. I would also encourage folks to watch those. Those are both great videos. I've got some questions. Oh, yes, we will absolutely share the PowerPoint. I will get that sent out along with the recording before the week is over. If you would like a certificate of attendance for participating in today's webinar for your continuing education, you can send me that request either via email, or you can let me know right here in the question pod. I'd also like you guys to leave behind, if you can. I know I said that the short survey or evaluation will pop up as soon as the webinar ends. It's just 2 questions, yes and no. But if you could also leave with Reyma and I some of your takeaways from today, or things you might think about or be implementing in the weeks ahead that you took from today. We would really appreciate it if you'd share that with us. And we will be back April 10th from 1 to 2 p.m. And we're going to be talking about thinking in themes with Ashley Lance again. That's going to be focusing and relying on job descriptions can limit creativity and set barriers to customize outcomes. But thinking in themes can open and expand our thinking to full inclusion in unlimited ways one can make a living. It can help identify businesses' unmet needs and allow employment staff and teams to explore various industries and careers with job seekers they support. So we hope to see you back April 10th. Thank you again, Reyma. And I'll make sure I get everything sent out before the week is over. Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jess. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks. You too. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.